Do you remember growing your first $900 tomato and thinking, gosh, if I just had gone to the grocery store, it would have been way cheaper? Yeah, same. But we are not doing that anymore. Welcome to the Food, Farm, and Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Graff, and together we are going to build our farms, homesteads, and gardens without destroying our finances. So let's get that bag of soil and money. Welcome back to another episode of the Food, Farm, and Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Graff, and together we are making farming and gardening more accessible and economically viable. Those are just big words I'm saying, but basically what that means is I want you to succeed with your farm, garden, and homestead dreams without destroying your financial dreams. And this whole podcast is going to help you do it. So, today we're talking about a very riveting subject, if I might say so myself. We're going to grow some herbs. We're going to talk about growing herb, okay? So, this podcast is going to be dedicated to peeling apart the cost of fresh herbs at the grocery store at the time of recording this podcast. Because let's be real, if you're listening to this 2 years later, I can't say that this is going to be accurate. I don't know. And what herbs that we're growing, if you should start them from seed or if you should buy a transplant, if you're better off just purchasing that herb at the grocery store. So let's get into it. I think herbs are the gateway plant to the gardening world. So if you are just starting out, this episode is for you. But first, a little message from our sponsors. Today's sponsor is yours truly with Duck River Apothecary. So as always, this is our tea business. So this is the easiest way for you to support this podcast and keep this educational content free for everyone. So buy some tea for yourself as a gift. It is cozy season. You want to not just boost your immunity with these tea blends, but I mean, come on, cuddle up, cozy up, grab some tea, link in the show notes. Please support us if you can. Back to the episode. All right, so we are talking about herbs, okay? So herbs are absolutely the gateway to gardening, and it's pretty much where everyone gets started. But I think herbs are actually a little more difficult than people give them credit for. They think they're just so simple and so easy, and they're not always, okay? Because you can totally kill herbs just like you can kill any other plant. And I find that what people do with herbs is they're trying to cram them into cute little mason jar-y type things and put them in their kitchen in low light conditions, and they're like, oh, I don't know why they're not surviving. And it's like, you didn't put them in an ideal container. You put them in the worst location in your whole household because it's convenient to you. And you're wondering why your herbs are dying. Okay, please do not do that, all right? We are not growing our herbs in mason jar containers on the kitchen sink, okay? Unless that's a good spot for you with lots of light. We got to make sure the plants are happy, okay? Now that I have got that little spiel out of the way, we are going to talk about the cost of herbs. So I went into the ye old grocery store of days past, and I went in there. I will not name what grocery store it was, but it was quite large, and it was blue. Was that cryptic enough? Actually, there's a couple blue grocery stores, but this one, pretty much for those little clamshells that were a half ounce for an herb. So I looked at thyme, rosemary, basil, mint, and cilantro. Okay, so 5 pretty common herbs. Now there are tons of other herbs, right? But these are just kind of 5 basic kitchen staples. Horsey. Staples. And pretty much they were all on sale for $1.78 for a half ounce clamshell. So it's one of those little plastic containers, with the exception of cilantro, because cilantro is sold by ye old bunch, okay? And that bunch was on sale for 68 cents, which that bunch, it looked like it was about 2 ounces. So honestly, the cilantro, a total steal by contrast to the other herbs. Now, I didn't want to just stop there. I was like, how much are the dried herbs? Because if we're going to analyze the cost of herbs, purchasing them at the store, we need to take into account dry herbs too, right? I was able to break this down between organic options and non-organic options, and the price discrepancy is startling. But for a dried 0.75 ounce container of thyme, it was $1.94. And then for the organic, which was 0.6 ounces, so less dried material, $4.36. Goodness gracious, highway robbery. Granted, let's be real, one of those jars of thyme is going to last like a whole year, and then maybe 2 years, and then maybe 3 years, because how much thyme do you actually use? Because it's a vile, disgusting herb that no one really likes, and it just makes everything taste like chicken. That's my personal preference, just throwing it out there. Anyway, moving on to the rosemary, which was 0.8 ounces at $2.32, or $4.36 for the organic. Basil was $1.12 for a 0.8 ounce pack. Interestingly, there was not an organic basil option at my grocery store. Hey, Big Blue Store, if you're looking, the people want organic dried basil. Let's just clear that up, okay? And then mint. Mint, also not something that was wildly available in the containers. They did have an organic option, which was 4.58. I think that's because dried mint is typically something you might put in tea. You don't use it in loads of like cooking recipes. So the packages for dried mint were a lot bigger, but I was just trying to be consistent, you know? So it was 0.5 ounces for $4.58. $4.58. And then ye old cilantro. I was like, does anyone use dried cilantro? Because when I think dried cilantro, I think coriander, which is the seed. But apparently people do use dried cilantro, and it was $1.94 for a half ounce, or if you got the organic, it was $4.58. So the moral of this story is herbs are surprisingly expensive, right? So, I mean, truly, it's not cheap. If you buy just a couple of these jars, they're basically $4.50 a jar. So you're taking up to $5 for just one jar of dried herbs. And I was like, that's not acceptable when you can absolutely grow them for way cheaper, okay? So, and also, not to even mention, those clamshells, if you're buying the little clamshells, if you have a recipe, those clamshells are half-ounce clamshells. If you have a recipe that calls for a good amount of basil, you will easily buy 3 of those clamshells, okay? 3 of those clamshells. And it's worth noting that they didn't offer organic options in half of these clamshells. They were all just kind of $1.78 regardless of if it was organic or not. And some of them were and some of them were not. So, really interesting, really unique. But cost of plants, I went and looked at the Wally. Oh, shoot! I just blew my cover. Okay, guys, I went to Walmart. The Big Blue Store I went to was Walmart. I was trying not to bash anywhere. I don't think it's not a Walmart problem. This is just where I shopped at, because, you know, I feel like it's called great value for a reason. It's supposed to have a great value. And I thought my herbs would have a great value there too. Anyway, so I was looking at plants. Now, the thyme plant and the cilantro plant were out of season, but I do remember them selling for $5.55 for a plant. There's like a little Bonnie plant. Whoa, crazy expensive. So I just put around $5 for the cost of purchasing a thyme plant and a cilantro plant. But Walmart did have little rosemary plants, basil plants, and mint plants, interestingly organic, all for $2.98 in the produce section. And I think that's a great little buy. Now, I know people will buy those instead of like the little packets of herbs, because let's be real, it's actually way cheaper to do that, I think. But anyway, I thought that's a really good deal. So, I mean, if you just look at those numbers right out of the gate, without trying to factor in like what's the yield of these plants, how much work does it take to take care of them, I mean, you can very just clearly see. You can buy an entire rosemary plant worth of rosemary for cheaper than you can buy the little dried container at the store. So I think it is a great value. I definitely think it's something that you could, you know, look into and purchase. So if you want to do this, I decided to take some time and go through each of these 5 varieties, give you some tips on if I would buy it from seed, buy it from transplant, how I would grow it, and then just a little bit of the yield. So starting out with thyme, because let's be real, thyme is money. Did you see what I did there? I think that's really funny. I wish everyone had such a lame sense of humor as I do. So thyme is a perennial plant. It is really cold hardy, so it can be grown pretty much anywhere. And I think that is A plus, right? So pretty much anyone can grow thyme. It grows quite large, but it has an incredibly slow growth habit. So if you're going to plant thyme, because it's a lot cheaper to plant and harvest your own thyme than it is to constantly be buying thyme, buy the transplant. So buy the started plant, transplant it out. We don't want to add time to the growing of the thyme, so do not grow it from seed. You absolutely can grow it from seed, but you have to start it incredibly early. And I just find that the time jump that you'll save by starting it with a transplant is absolutely 100% worth it. But I started a transplant. It was literally like maybe the size of my finger, a little tiny little guy. And now it's truly probably about the size of a basketball. And it's been thriving, and I've harvested so much time off of it. And what I do is I harvest it. I have an herb drying rack, and I just let them air dry so I can enjoy the fresh herbs while they're in season, which for here, we pretty much have fresh herbs running from May, April-ish, all the way to October. And then through those winter months, I use a small portion of dried. So thyme is definite buy, definitely purchase the transplant. Rosemary. So rosemary is not for everyone. So you might be stuck growing rosemary or buying rosemary. So here's the thing. Rosemary plants typically cost, a couple bucks, and that's not bad at all. But they are perennials in some clients and not perennials in other climates. Other clients. So zones 6 to 9, they pretty well and good thrive. But I will caution, so I'm in zone 7. I don't remember if it's A or B because they keep changing the growing zones. I think it's zone 7B. Anyway, so I'm in zone 7B, and they didn't make it through winter this year. And they're supposed to make it through winter. We just had an incredible cold snap, and it was like, cow, and my rosemary plant died. And let me just tell you, that rosemary plant was huge. So for me to lose that was really, really devastating. So if you are in an area that they don't perennialize very well, or you have to bring them in or out, it might not be worth it. It might be better to just buy the rosemary, right? So it just really depends. But if you are in one of these warmer zones, definitely buy it. Definitely transplant it. Do not grow your rosemary from seed. That is too much work. Trust me, you don't want to be doing that. But what's amazing about rosemary is it can easily yield up to 2.5 pounds of rosemary every single year. So just one plant for a couple dollars can yield you loads and loads of rosemary that you can use year round. Next up, we've got basil. So basil is one of those that you can either grow from seed or transplants, whichever you would prefer. So if you're growing it from seed, you can easily grow loads of basil for just a few bucks. Transplants, I think buying that little transplant that is from the grocery area, they usually have 10 different distinct plants in there. So if you can buy that and then split that up and plant them out individually, you can have 10 plants for $3. And with an average yield of anywhere from 6 to 12 ounces of basil per a single basil plant, and I've had basil plants that do way more than that, I think. So I think that's a gross miscalculation. But you can easily have hundreds of ounces of basil just for a few bucks. And basil dries incredibly well. You can also use it to make pestos, freeze them so well, so amazing, delicious, absolutely worth it. And you can use you can take cuttings of basil to propagate. Just take a cutting, put it in water, and you can have basil for years and years and years and years and years. But you can absolutely grow that from seed or transplants or cuttings if you have someone who has a basil plant. And then mint. So mint is a perennial, and I do think it is definitely worth growing as well. You can easily get half a pound per plant. But the thing is, mint creates so many more plants. It bloops up and it will spread everywhere. So please, please, please plant it in a container. I also think that mint makes a lot of sense to just buy as a transplant. It's way, way simpler and way easier. But keep it contained, but it will grow so much, and you can dry it and you can use it in tea blends. And then at that point, you're not just using it to season your food, but you've got your beverage right there. So you got food and beverage covered. I mean, for dollars, for pennies, you can have so much mint. Now, the last one is cilantro. Now, this one, I'm going to say it's not hugely high on my list of encouraging you to grow cilantro. So this is why. Cilantro is an annual and it doesn't really love super high heat, which means it bolts really quickly and really easily. So it goes from a great little stand of cilantro to absolutely not really great very quickly. Cilantro, though, when it does go to seed, and if it puts off seed, it actually produces the spice coriander. So coriander is the cilantro seed. So if you look at it from that angle, where you could potentially have cilantro as well as the coriander spice, I think it's an absolute yes. 100% yes. But if you're just growing it for cilantro itself, when you can see prices at like 68 cents for a 2-ounce bunch, I think I could rationalize the amount of times I need cilantro. It's pretty dang easy to buy and pretty cheap to buy because you're getting a couple ounces for that 68 cents. I think it's doable. I think it's maybe a good value to just buy, but definitely don't let that discourage you. Definitely consider growing it, but do not buy it as a transplant, okay? If you're gonna grow it from seed. If you're trying to grow it from a transplant, you are wasting your money because it's not like these perennials that come back year after year. Cilantro is an annual. It will die off. It will bolt very quickly and you will have lost your money for no reason. So those are just a few of the herbs. Obviously, there are so many different types of herbs. I think something that I strive for here is to grow as many of my herbs as possible because it's something that is cheap and affordable to do. You establish your perennial herb beds once. You can easily grow annuals from seed and they produce their own seed and you can just grow them cyclically every single year. And it can save loads of money. You have control over what's sprayed on the plant. Is it good? Is it bad? You have so many more options if you just grow your own herbs. And then what that does is it frees your budget up. That way you can buy these spices and these other herbs that we just can't produce here, right? So like you're not just gonna have a cinnamon tree in your backyard in zone 6. It's just not gonna happen. It's just not how it works. So if you can handle growing all these herbs that grow in your zone, then you cut all of that from your budget and you leave space to enjoy a few of those more exotic herbs, which I know you're not thinking twice about buying anyways. But if you want to be frugal and savvy, this is a great way to stretch your budget so you can enjoy some of the exotic herbs while also spicing up all of your food all of the time with your own herb garden in your backyard. As far as soils and container, just find what you have on hand. Lighting is critical. Follow the seed packet instructions or the plant instructions. Give it some good soil and use whatever containers you can have around. You can absolutely grow these things inside or outdoors, just whatever is great for you. I think it's excellent for apartment gardeners to get started and get growing and kind of get that bug for producing your own food and having some sort of sustainable element in your life by producing a lot of your own herbs. So I hope you will choose to grow your own herbs. Please let me know if you do. And as always, do not forget to like this podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. Tell your friends about it. Share it with your mama and your mama's mama and your brother's mama's cousin. Okay? Do that for us. It's a great way to take care of us so we can keep doing what we do and creating this content that will hopefully help you build your farm and finances and have the garden of your dreams. Until next time, this is Austin Graff signing off for Food, Farm, and Finance.